take a look at this problem. We've got 5x to the fourth plus 7x to the third plus 119x squared plus 175x minus 150 equals 0. And I want to solve the equation for all the complex solutions given exact forms in your solution sets. Okay, this is on try 2. First one I was just kind of tired and making some mistakes. Just woke up. Well, we're wanting to solve this, which is the same as finding zeros. When you're dealing with polynomials, your degree, your largest power, tells you how many answers you're going to have. So our degree is 4, means we're going to have 4 answers. We're going to use a calculator to get some of the answers to begin with. So let's go to our calculator. I'll press my y equals, press my clear if you have anything there. 5x to the fourth, so do 5x caret 4. If you have one of the newer T84s, you have to press right arrow key to get out of exponent mode right now. Plus 7x to the third. And again, I'm doing caret, do the power. Do a right arrow key if you got one of the newer T84s. Plus 119x squared. Plus 175x minus 150, and then my down arrow, and I'm going to put 0 on y2. Okay, now we're going to do second trace. I'm going to press 5 to choose intersect. And our answers where it crosses the x-axis. Looks like -2 and 1. So let me do inner on first curve, inner on second curve, and let me put -2 in. And it comes back and tells us our first answer is -2. Well, we'll go through the process again and find the other one. So we'll do second trace, press 5 for intersect, inner on first curve, inner on second curve, and we put 1 in for the guess. You don't have to actually input the answer to get the you don't have to input the answer for the guess to get the answer, but I tend to get in that habit. If I put in 2, it should have went back and find 1. So I do 1 and then enter, and that comes back, and I expect my answer to be 1. It's not. It's 0.6. If you get decimals, remember you're going to do a second mode to exit out, and then you do math, enter. This was a pretty easy decimal, so you might not be able to need to do that, but they're not always easy. So our second answer is 3/5. Well, we're going to take the answers the calculator gave us. We found 2. We need 4. We're going to plug those into synthetic division. So I'll plug in -2 first. There we go. Now our largest power is x to the fourth. So I'm real small across the top. I'm going to write x to the fourth, x to the third, x squared, x, and no x. Now we're going to go through a series of adding, multiplying over and over until we're done. So we'll add, first column, 5 plus nothing. Then we multiply. You always multiply by the number in the box, but number you put down here. -2 times 5 is -10. Then you add. 7 plus -10 is -3. Then you multiply. Always multiply by the number in the box, but number you put down here. -2 times -3 is 6. Add. 119 plus 6 is 125. Multiply. You always multiply by the number in the box, but number you put down here. -2 times 125 is -250. Add. 175 and -250 is -75. Multiply. -2 times -75 gives us a positive 150. And then add. -150 plus 150 gives you 0. Now notice we got 0 as our remainder. That means we found our first answer. That's a factor theorem. So the first answer is -2. Now this started out as x to the fourth. We're now down to x to the third. And we want to plug in our second answer on the line we just found. So we're going to plug in 3/5 under this line. Okay, now we'll add. 5 plus 19 is 5. Multiply. You always multiply by the number in a box, but number you put down here. 3/5 times 5 gives us 3. Add. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Multiply. 3/5 times 0 is 0. Add. 125 plus 0 is 125. Multiply. 3/5 times 125 is 75. Add. Negative 75 plus 75 gives us 0. That means we found a second answer. No big surprise. Calculator told us those are our answers, so you better get a zeros remainder. Now this was x to the third. This is now down to x squared. So we have 5x squared plus 125 equal to 0. Whenever your middle term is missing here, then the square root property is going to be a perfect choice. So I'm going to take the 125 over, and it becomes a negative 125. Divide both sides by 5. And we get x squared is equal to negative 25. Square root property says if you got something squared equals something else, you drop the squared and you put a plus or minus square root around the other side. And remember, a negative inside of a square root gives you an I, and 5 times 5 is 25, so that's x is equal to plus or minus 5i. And those are our 4 answers. Now, that's using technology to help you get some of your answers. I'm going to do this next, do this problem over, doing it by hand. So if you're happy with technology right there, then go ahead and shut the video off. Otherwise, stick around and I'll show it by hand. It's kind of a hideous problem by hand. I've been kind of dreading doing this problem for that reason. I'm going to pretend I don't know what the answers are, because that'd be kind of cheating if I didn't. Okay, so doing it by hand. This number at the end is our P, and number at the very beginning is our Q. And this is assuming it's in standard form. Terms are arranged from largest power down to smallest. Well, we're going to write down all the products give us 150. We got 1 times 150. We got 2 times 75. We got 3 times 50. We got 5 times 30. 6 6 times should get my calculator out, but 6 times 25. Yeah, 6 times 25. 7, no. 8, no. 9, no. 10 times 15. 11, no. 12, no. 13, no. 14, no. Okay, so that's all of them. But even more than that, to get 150, this says negative 150. But regardless, whatever your sign is, for example, to get negative 150, you could have positive 1 times negative 150, or you could have negative 1 times a positive 150. So you have to put plus or minuses in all of these. There we go. Now we'll do the same thing for the Q. We write down all the products give us 5. Well, that one's easy. 1 times 5. Now all of our possible answers are P over Q. So we're going to take each value of P here and we're going to put it over each value of Q. So 1 over 1 is 1. 2 over 1 is 2. 3 over 1 is 3. 5 over 1 is 5. 6 over 1 is 6. 10 over 1, 10. 15 over 1, 25 over 1, 30 over 1, 50 over 1, 75 over 1, 150 over 1. Excuse me. Then I'll take each one of these values and put it over 5. So 1 over 5 is 1/5. And 2 over 5 is 2/5. 3 over 5, 3/5. 5 over 5 is 1, which I already wrote down. 6 over 5, 6/5. 10 over 5, which is 2, which I already wrote down. 15 over 5, which is 3, which I already got written down. 25 over 5 is 5, which I wrote down. 30 over 5 is 6, which is written down. 50 over 5 is 10, so I got written that down. 75 over 5 is 15, which I got written down. 150 over 5 is 30, which I got written down. Okay, so those are all of our possible answers. So what we do is we're going to plug each one of these into synthetic division and see if it works. Now I'll go through this kind of fast, otherwise this video would be 5 hours long if I went as slow as the first synthetic division I showed. 5, 7, 119, 175, 1. Okay. So I'll plug in my first possible answer, positive 1. Add, multiply, watch me screw it up. Add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply. At the point where you see that the remainder is not going to be 0, then that one did not work. So you go on to your next possible answer. So we'll plug in negative 1. So I got 5, 7, 119, 175, negative 150. Okay. Let's see. Add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. 58. Multiply. It's not going to be 0, so that doesn't work. Now, next one we're going to do is 2. And I'm not going to keep writing these down. I'm going to undo this so I have space to show it. So let's plug in 2 now. It's negative 150. Okay. So add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply. 601, 306, I think. Add. 2 times 481 plus a negative 150 is not going to give me 0, so I know that doesn't work. Now, negative 2, remember, is one we said that did work. That's what the calculator gave us. Now, sometimes there's little shortcuts you can use on these, which we're not going to go over here, because I'm guessing that 99% of you are going to be using the calculator to do this. Okay, not 100%. Add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply. Excuse me. So that's negative 250? Yeah. Okay. Then negative 75 and then multiply. And we get this. Okay, at this point, we found an answer. Whenever you get 0, the factor theorem says you found your first answer. So our first answer is negative 2. Now, what I've often wondered, if at this point, if you redo this, if it eliminates some of your choices. So let's do that just for fun. Because obviously there's a ton of options here. Okay, what will give me 75? Well, obviously 1 times 75 gives us that. What am I doing? Because what we now have is we have 5x to the third minus 3x squared plus 125x minus 75 is equal to 0. So we got a new p and we got a new q. So p is now going to be 1 times 75 2, no. 3 times something. 3 times 25. 4, no. 5 times something. Let's see, 1, 15. 6, no. 7, no. 8, no. 9, 10. I'm not seeing anything. So I think that's it for P. And then Q is still 1 times 5. And I see it does look like some of my items have been reduced. So it does benefit us, I guess, to rewrite that. Way back when I learned this in college algebra, they didn't tell us to do that. They had us go off our original list. Now I'm going to take each one of these P values and put it over the Q. So 1 over 1, 3 over 1, 5 over 1, 15 over 1. Just gives us all the values of P. So we got 1, 3, 5, 15, 25, 75. And then I'm going to take each one of these and put them over the value of Q. So 1 over 5, that's 1/5. 3 over 5, 3/5. 5 over 5 is 1, we got that. 15 over 5 is 3, we got that. 25 over 5 is 5, we got that. And 75 over 5 is 15, which we got that too. So those are our possible answers. Okay, well, we start over. Now, I don't need to do the ones. I already did those up above. They don't work up above, they won't work down here. So those are gone. So let's go to our 3. And working with this new polynomial we got here. So I got 5, negative 3, 125, and negative 75. So I'll add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply. And I know that's not going to give me 0. So at the point where you see that, 3 times 161 plus negative 75 is not 0. So 3 doesn't work. So let's go to negative 3. Okay, so we'll add, we'll multiply. Let's see, add, multiply. My basic math skills are almost non-existent this morning. 24 to, okay, 179. And this times this plus negative 75 is not going to give me 0. So that doesn't work. So we're down to 3's. Let me erase those so I can start on the next one, which is 5's. Now, one little note I'll mention here, I'm going to ignore it because I want to show the synthetic division route. But if you look up here, sometimes when you get down to the x to the third level, you can use factoring by grouping. I'm going to ignore that and go this route. But okay, we'll plug in 5. But it definitely is an option if you're doing it by hand. Okay, so I add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply. That's not going to give me 0. So let's do negative 5. My son's here making... You want to take a shower? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So add, multiply, add, multiply. 0, 4, okay, add, multiply. That's not going to give me 0. So 5's don't work. Okay, so these are gone, these are gone. So those are gone. I think you kind of get the idea. Let me come over here to, I don't even remember what our answer was now. was it 3/5, I think? Let's do 3/5. I'm getting kind of bored doing synthetic division. But you go through and you try all these possibilities. It might be negative 3/5. So we've got 5, negative 3, 125, negative 75. Add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, and add, and we get another 0. Which means we get x is equal to 3/5. Now your goal, when you're going through and doing synthetic division, your goal is to get down to the x squared level. And this was x to the third here, and now we're down to the x squared level. Because if you're down to the x squared level, you can drop out and you can use some other technique. So we got 5x squared plus 125 equal to 0. Take the 125 over, it becomes a negative 125. Divide both sides by 5, and you get negative 25 on the right side. Square root property. Drop your squared, put a plus or minus square root around the other side, and you get x is equal to plus or minus 5i. And that accounts for our 4 answers. When all said and done, you should have 4 answers circled if your degree is 4. Now I mentioned an alternative way, and let me show that. It does not work on every problem, so don't get excited and thinking that I just did it deliberately the hard way. On some problems, you have to go through and try all the choices, because this will not factor using grouping. But let's try it and see if it will work in this one. So I got 5x third minus 3x squared plus 125x minus 75 equal to 0. Factoring by grouping you can do when you got four more terms. Specifically in this case we got 4 terms. So we're going to group the first 2 together and last 2 together. First 2 have an x squared in common, and that gives us 5x minus 3. The second group has a 25 in common, and that gives us 5x minus 3. Now they both have a 5x minus 3 in common, so I factor that out, and that leaves us x squared plus 25. Then we're setting each one of those equal to 0, so we set 5x minus 3 equal to 0, and we set x squared plus 25 equal to 0. This one, take negative 3 over, divide both sides by 5. And we get our 3/5. On this one, take 25 over, it becomes a negative 25. And square root property says you drop your squared and you put a plus or minus square root on the other side, which ends up giving us x is equal to plus or minus 5i. You can see that would definitely save you some time. So it's worth looking at that to see if you can do factor by grouping, and that only occurs when you get down to the x to the third level. But if it doesn't work, then you just have to go through here and through brute force try all of your possible rational answers. Anyway, this problem showed how to use the fundamental theorem of algebra on the calculator and by hand to find all of your zeros, all your solutions to a polynomial equation.